Views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
User joined your channel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal. Excited to be with you here on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. That's my usual slot. This is episode number 61 of All You Can Eat. Couple of things are notable, at least from my perspective. Number one, we have a new microphone. And so I anticipate a better quality of sound, frankly, and we'll see. And the other piece that I think is unusual but meaningful from my perspective is I'm coming to you live. That's not unusual. That I mostly do. But rather than my home base in New York City, I come to you now, tonight, live on the last day of July from the Hamptons. Some of you might have heard about it. It's a beautiful part of the world, is the way I would start. So for those of you who do not know about the Hamptons, if you do a Google thing, one of the first things that come up is, so what is the Hamptons known for? And I suppose that one depends a lot on who you ask. So let me give it to you from my perspective as someone who's lived on the East Coast in New York for my whole life. The Hamptons is a special place. It's special in a whole lot of ways. First, that it's beautiful. It's on the ocean. But let me take it a little further than that. If you live around New York City, one of the things that you hope for is great as a city as it is. One of the things that you want to do if you can is escape periodically. One of the benefits that you have coming from New York is that you can escape going northbound, get yourself in the mountains, Catskills, Adirondacks, beautiful part of the world also, Hudson Valley. There's just a lot of beauty up north, maybe 2 hours out of the city, starting there. Or you can go south and east. And you discover what turns out to be a surprise for so many people. When I say New York, and then the next thing I say is, great beaches, people who don't know think that I'm kidding. But right outside of Manhattan Island is Long Island. Literally, a long island. Atlantic Ocean on one side, Long Island Sound on the other. I don't know, over 100 miles of Atlantic Ocean coastline that you can get to from Manhattan, I don't know, let's say a half an hour. In terms of the part that's closest to New York, maybe less, frankly, on a subway, I don't know, on a car, bike. Or you could take the trip out to the end of Long Island to a place called Montauk, all the while recognizing that you're driving along the Atlantic Ocean. So the first thing about the Hamptons is, from my perspective, beaches. Now, when I say that New York has great beaches and people who don't know, kind of snicker, let me put it to you this way. Some of the finest beaches in the country. And this is no bullshit. This is no, New York hyperbole. Look up a guy named Dr. Beach, who for over, 2 decades has been analyzing every public beach in the country on a whole series of criteria, data-based, And it is not unusual to find that some of the best public beaches in the country show up in, Hawaii. Okay, that's not going to be surprising to you, but some of those best beaches in the country show up right here on Long Island in a place called Southampton and another called East Hampton, both the major hubs of what we know to be the Hamptons. So a 2-hour escape, let's call it, out of New York City. Well, then again, that assumes that there's no traffic, which is quite rare these days. But a 2-hour escape out of New York City, and you find some of the finest beaches in the United States of America. That's not the only reason people come out here. Going back 50, 60, 70 years, there was something about the light out here, something about the landscape that drew artists and writers. So you have communities of artists and writers that came out years and years ago to paint, to write, to photograph for the beautiful colors. Because out here in those days, it's predominantly farmland. It's not so much farmland anymore. Most of that has given way to residential homes that oftentimes are owned by, the rich and famous, if we're not gonna bullshit each other. New York City, home to a number of industries from retail to banking, finance, to real estate, to media, technology, that have created a lot of wealthy people. And one of the places that the wealthy people congregate out of New York is in the Hamptons. Well, it's not unusual to see homes here for $5 million. I mean, I assume you can get one for $1 million. Not that that's inexpensive, but then you see homes for $40 and $50 million. I mean, the area attracts wealthy and celebrities. So, who has a home out in the Hamptons? Martha Stewart, Jerry Seinfeld. These kind of people, celebrities, media people, a ton of famous people, rich people. So you have, on the one hand, if we're going to be completely objective and honest about it, a beautiful locale. The colors are stunning. The beach is gorgeous. The air quality is excellent. There's still some open land. There's still some agriculture. There are still farmers. I could walk 5 minutes to a farm stand and talk to a farmer. I've actually had him on the show before. Fairview Farms. 5 generations, they're here. 5 generations. You see that a lot. Beautiful air, beautiful color, beautiful landscape, and fantastic beach. No commerce on the beach, which is extraordinary. You can't go onto the beach and buy a hot dog because they're not selling them. Can't go onto the beach and ride on an amusement park ride. You can't go onto the beach and basically buy much of anything. That beach is occupied by homes and by dunes and by the Atlantic Ocean. Fantastic. It's beautiful. But, if I'm going to be honest, sometimes those rich can be difficult. Sometimes the Hamptons can be the epicenter of entitlement. But hey, eventually they go back to work. So I'm coming to you from the Hamptons, and I suppose if you kept going just past the Hamptons, the end of Long Island, you arrive in a place called Montauk. Now, Montauk historically kind of very fishy, like fishing community. I mean, I'm going back like 400 years. I mean, fishing, whaling, surfing. It used to be called the Unhamptons. Well, not so much anymore. I mean, I suppose to some extent it still maintains a lot of the character that it had from those days, a lot of the charm. But then again, in high season, and we are in high season. It has gotten extremely populated, and scene-y. Anyway, on tonight's podcast from out here on Long Island in the Hamptons, I'll tell you about a place that I went to last week in Montauk for the purpose of dining out. And also on the show this evening, it's one of these where I have too much material in front of me, so it's fairly wide-ranging. I mean, I had a conversation earlier today with a chef somewhere on the island, not out here in the Hamptons, like halfway into Long Island, a place called Farmingdale. Owns a restaurant. We had a 10-minute chat about lobster rolls. Somewhere in my notes, I have an article on. I'm going to push the button and tell you. Oh, best sandwiches. Check this out. Somewhere in my notes, I have an article on the best sandwiches in America. I mentioned that in the context of, the lobster roll, which has become, well, I mean, I don't know how long it has been, but doesn't it seem that lobster rolls are way more popular now than they ever have been? Like that, lobster rolls were always great, but now they're all over. They're all over all year, not just up there in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, up there. I mean, great, but they're all over the place, including out on the east end of Long Island at the Surf Lodge where I dined last week. So I had a conversation tonight, and I may, if time allows, I'll plug that into the system here, because I asked Chef Eric, how you pick a good lobster, how it should be prepared, and then what does it take to make the perfect lobster roll. I think that that's valuable information, especially this time of year. The summer, as I have said over and over again, is just a delicious time to cook because there's so much beautiful stuff coming out of the ground, especially from my perspective when it comes to corn, when it comes to tomatoes, basil, when it comes to stone fruit, cherries, nectarines, watermelon. Holy wow. Ice cold chunks of watermelon, beautiful on their own as dessert. And yet, I find myself buying an entire watermelon, the price of which essentially has gone just berserk. I mean, I don't know why watermelon should be this expensive, but there is a way around the expense of watermelon. What are they charging now? $79 a pound? The watermelon weighs what? I don't know, 7-8 pounds. So it's an investment, but there's Costco. And as you know, my friends, you are listening to Rob Rosenthal, the Costco Ho, where an entire watermelon will set you back $3.99. The entire thing. You slice that baby in half, you get it nice and cold, cut it into big old chunks, and everybody feels like they're having dessert, and that's good. But when you have an entire watermelon, maybe you got some watermelon on your hands. What do? You scoop the hell out of that baby and you put it in a blender. You put that blender at enough speed so that watermelon instantly turns to red water. I don't care if you filter it or you don't filter it. You don't need to. Too much work. But you blend that watermelon, and what else do you put in it? Like, what do you think it needs for it to be special, delightful, exciting? What do you think it needs? Okay. We're going to get to the alcohol in a second. I'm talking about just to enhance the watermelon juice that you've just made from a quarter or a half of a huge sweet watermelon. All you really want in there is a little bit of lime zest, to be honest with you. Yeah, lime is the counterpoint, the minor touch of acidity accentuates the natural sweetness of the watermelon. So you could drink that juice as is, or, and here is the beauty of the watermelon, my friends. You ever have a watermelon margarita? Because all you need is more lime juice and tequila. Maybe a teaspoon or so of agave to give it a sweetness, or or an orange liqueur, whatever. Triple sec, Grand Marnier. You got yourself a beautiful watermelon margarita this time of year. Kidding me? Put ice in, freeze it up if you want to do it that way. You ever have a watermelon daiquiri? Just do the same thing, man. More lime juice, a little touch of sweetness, and rum. You got yourself a watermelon daiquiri. And here's the other thing. You don't like vodka. I mean, you don't like tequila, maybe. You're not interested in rum, but you're happy to drink vodka. Well, there you go. Watermelon, lime, and vodka. And you go, hey, you know what? I could do this. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful drink. Everything good. I mentioned the summer fruits and vegetables because last week, episode 60, I had the good fortune to get on the line with world-famous chef Jean-Georges Vangeristan. Now listen, there's a lot of great chefs, but this guy is the real deal. 39 restaurants around the world, Michelin stars, a history of making great food at great restaurants, and not just any old food, but inventive. I think Jean-Georges is the guy, in my estimation, who really introduced us to the concept of global cross-cultural cuisine, having spent a whole lot of time in Asia. He brought those flavors into his French background and technique to invent a style of food which now all of a sudden is everywhere. But certainly one of the leaders, one of the pioneers in that business. Anyway, I'm on with him last week. Why? Because he's opening a new restaurant at the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 60th floor of the Comcast Tower, or whatever they call it. And I'm on the phone, and I asked Jean-Georges a couple of questions. One, how did he, when did he fall in love with food? I'm always interested in knowing how people kind of got into it. He told an interesting story. Then I said to him, what advice would he give to chefs? And I loved his answer, which essentially was keep it simple, like 3 ingredients, clarity of flavor. And I loved his answer so much because I am a cookbook author, and the principle behind my cooking, the philosophy behind my cooking, is precisely that. Get the best ingredients you can, don't mess them up too much. If I can make a dish with 2 ingredients, I'm in heaven. If I could do it with 3, great. There are certain foods that I can make with 1 ingredient that cannot be improved, believe it or not. If you've heard my show before, you know that I'm talking here about a clam, little neck, placed on the barbecue grill of your choice with the lid closed until the clam opens, at which point you will suck out the clam itself, the clam juice, otherwise known as the clam liquor, and you will give one to a friend or lover, and they will look at you with a straight face and say, you must tell me the recipe. This is 1 ingredient heaven. Jean-Georges, last week, how'd you fall in love with food? What advice do you give chefs? And then, and this is where I'm going with this whole thing, I say, what do we make, man? You cook? I sure do, says he. Like he laughed. Like, why would you ask that if I meant at home. I said, you cook at home. Yes, I do. The only difference between his cooking at home, he explained, was that when he cooks in a restaurant, everything is put on the plate. They make your plate beautiful, right? Because the theory is that, well, you're not going to do it yourself, but, there is the belief that you first eat with your eyes, right? You're seeing something that looks beautiful. You're more inclined to whatever. I don't care because I'm not a plating guy. I'm a taste guy. I'll throw some delicious slop on the plate. It may not look pretty, but you're gonna like my food. You like the taste. Anyway, I said to him, Monsieur Jean-Georges, I need, what am I going to make now? You cook, so tell me what I should make using my formula. Most taste. I want to get the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. He said, well, that's easy. He said, this time of year, you go out and get yourself some corn. Because the corn is sweet. And I had some corn last week at a farm in the Hamptons. I asked the farmer, how is the corn now? Because it seemed very early to me. He said, taste it. I peeled back the husk of the corn. I took a bite of the corn, yes, raw. The corn was sweet like candy. I put a dozen in a bag. Jean-Georges, what am I making? Get corn, get local tomatoes. Again, my friends, they're not coming in cellophane. They're not from a hothouse. They got to come out of the ground. Get corn, get tomatoes, and add in a jalapeno or a serrano pepper, sliced thin, and basil. He cuts the kernels off the corn and sautés them. I don't, but that's neither here nor there. It means that all he's really using, to dress, if you will, his corn, tomato, jalapeno, basil salad is olive oil, maybe a squeeze of lime. That's fine. I played it slightly differently. I microwaved the corn in the husk for about 2 or 3 minutes, just to steam it up a tad. I cut off the kernels then. I cut the tomatoes. Get the best tomatoes that you can. They're out of the ground. They're ripe. They're red. They're delicious. Cut them into bite-sized pieces. That goes in the bowl. Get a jalapeno or serrano. They look similar. Whichever you can get your hands on. Slice it thin. If you want to make it less spicy, remove from the inside of the jalapeno both the seeds and the white pith. So, dice up your jalapeno, and then that all goes together, and you tear in some fresh basil, and life is good. I happen to have had some arugula at home. I put it into the salad. I happen to have had a little bit of red onion. I sliced it into the salad. I had lemon and olive oil, so I dressed it with that and some salt. My kid is eating the salad and looks at me and said, "Why did you put sugar in the dressing?" "My dear," said I have never put sugar in the dressing in my entire lifetime. That is from the corn. So, again, summer, that salad, and the beauty of that salad was you could have it as a salad, or you could serve it over a piece of fish or chicken or steak, or as Jean-Georges said, go ahead, crack a couple of eggs, put it in that. It's a very kind of accommodating mixture of ingredients that bring you a little bit of sweetness from the corn, certainly a little bit of acidity from the tomato. You can amplify that with a touch of lemon or lime, fragrance from the basil, earthiness from olive oil. Just a beautiful combination of food. I would point out at this moment 2 things. One, if you want to hear last week's podcast episode number 60, you just go to iHeartRadio and do a search in podcast, either for my name, Rob Rosenthal, or All You Can Eat, and it'll show up. You can look or listen, actually, to any of the past 60 episodes. And since I mentioned my book before, you can also look that up. It's called Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. And it features not only my explanation of how to cook and why to cook and how to make cooking fun and what the key kind of concepts are that you should know, but not about 100 recipes using the least number of ingredients with the least effort to get the maximum amount of taste. So as I mentioned, this past weekend, wow, that was not a long time ago, was it? What am I, Wednesday? 4 or 5 nights ago, I was invited out to dinner at the Surf Lodge, Montauk, New York. Lovely Montauk. So you ride right past the Hamptons, you ride into Montauk, very beachy. You could smell the sea out there. You drive all the way to the end, you go to the lighthouse, but we don't drive all the way in. We went to the Surf Lodge, which for years now has been an insanely popular spot. I mean, I don't remember how many years ago I first stopped into the Surf Lodge. Why? Because you're on the water, number one. Not the ocean, the bay. And that's okay. And there's music going, and there's a crowd, and then there's there's sand and places to lay in the sand, or you could go up on the deck, and this past weekend there's a DJ on the deck, and then there's a restaurant. So I went to check out the restaurant. Now, first of all, when I say it's a scene, I mean there's the place is like a madhouse, hundreds and hundreds of people, all ages, but I mean predominantly 20s, 30s. You may see some 40s over there. So I was somebody's parent in that room, but I wasn't the only one. Anyway, I was there to dine at the Surf Lodge for the reason that you got what's his name? Sean? I'm sorry. Hang on. Herget. Where are you, man? I owe you this. Okay. Because the guy who designs the menu is a terrific chef. And the guy who makes the food is good too. And I feel now, and I'm sorry to put you through this wait, but I'm going to now find exactly who these people are because it would be wrong not to. So bear with me as I tell you a little bit about the Surf Lodge out there. Let me just see if I can find you. Here we go. Fantastical. Love when that happens. Okay. James Beard, yeah, Michelin starred. Sean Herget. Sean Herget, the culinary director of the Surf Lodge this summer. Michelin starred. Nominated for James Beard Award. This is serious, man. Food is minimal, focuses on precision, technique, using ingredients, and he has got a head chef out there by the name of Robert Sieber. They have a new menu that they've developed. I tasted some things from the menu that were real good. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what it was, but before I tell you what it was, I'm going to give you something to contemplate, which is one of Rosenthal's rules, which is to say that the more beautiful the view, especially those that are on the water, the less likely you are to get a really good meal. They just don't have to. I can't tell you how many times you go to a place and you go, wow, this is spectacular, and you have food that's disappointing. Well, that's not the case here at the Surf Lodge. These guys are putting out some serious food, and not uncomplicated, man. I'm not talking fancy again. This is like, it's the summer, it's Long Island, there's going to be fish, there's going to be seafood, there's going to be a grilled piece of, steak, there's going to be chicken, there's going to be oysters. But I'll tell you the thing that blew me away. Not only that the food was good, that's a bonus, but like how many meals they're serving there. I mean, you go to a decent, pretty busy restaurant, and you say to a chef, how many covers do you do? How many meals are you making for dinner? And, you hear 200, you go, that's a lot of meals. 200 covers a night. Some restaurants may do, 50. Some may do 400. Whatever, there's a range. But 200 is like, you're cooking for a lot of people. But not at the Surf Lodge, my friends. 600 covers a night. 600 covers on a decent night over there. 600 meals coming out. Now, when you couple the idea that you have to cook for 600 people with the idea that you're on the water, you should lower your expectations. Honestly, they're going to get the crowd one way or the other. But I'm going to tell you something. I opened up with some charred octopus. I am a lover of the octopus, so I always like to have some of that while I'm perusing the menu. Solid. Served with nice Kalamata olives, artichokes, preserved lemon. I'm feeling good about that. I'm happy to be eating that. You do a quick scan of the menu, and the other thing that comes to mind is, in terms of like an early, like I want to have this now, is the local fluke crudo. Crudo meaning, raw, uncooked. And fluke is local. I mean, you go fishing out of Montauk, you go on one of those fishing boats out of there, like miles from the restaurant. Most of the time, you come back with fluke, a flat bottom, a fish that hangs out on the bottom. It's a flat bottom fish, white flesh meat, delicate, delicious, not terribly dissimilar to flounder, but light. Makes a beautiful piece of sushi or sashimi. I believe it's called hirame. But then you do it crudo, rather than sushi style. It gives the chef the opportunity to, play with it a little bit, to kind of enhance the natural delicacy of the fish. In this case, crudo is served with yuzu, citrusy Japanese yuzu. I don't know if I would call it a dressing. Anyway, jalapeno in there, again, for the reason that we talked about before, which is a little bit of heat sometimes, a little bit, is a palate stimulator, and cilantro. Delicious. Local fruit, fluke, crudo. And, looking around that menu, you got roasted cauliflower, curry sauce, some truffle mushroom ravioli, some pan-seared diver scallops. I mean, when scallops are done well, they're great. I didn't have them, but I just love the dish. Whatever the market, fish is that they're going to do, that you'll have. You get some chicken that's rubbed with some type of exotic spice, in this case chermoula. You'll have a grilled bone-in ribeye, because sometimes you're just in the mood for a nice piece of red meat. You get yourself a whole lobster if you want. They serve it a little bit Asian style because it has red chili, coconut milk, basil, jasmine rice, delicious. We went in for the lobster roll, and they serve it generally with what they call a Marie Rose sauce, which is kind of a fancified Frenchy, European, kind of Russian-y dressing. My recollection is some mayo, maybe some ketchup, maybe some Worcestershire, that kind of thing. And there's a little Tabasco in there, and it comes with nice French fries. Had some of that, and I would have that all over again. And rather than segueing into another main, I was intrigued by the yellowfin tuna poke. Poke, again, uncooked. Japanese style. The yellowfin tuna came with the sesame soy dressing, avocado, and wasabi road, they called it. Well, it was outstanding. Just outstanding. Just really delightful eating. Raw tuna, Asian, vinaigrette here with sesame soy, avocado for the, kind of the sweet creaminess of it all. Wasabi to give you, again, a little bit of hit of heat. Delicious. Don't know why I had dessert. Sean Hergat, Robert Sieber, but whatever I had, I remember it being somewhere between a brownie and ice cream. Can't hurt you. So good on you, Surf Lodge. I had no problem listening to the very loud music. There was a very lively scene. Hundreds and hundreds. I would say, I was sitting in a restaurant that was comfortably serving, 100 and 150 people, however many it was. Everybody seemed to be quite happy on the water. A huge crowd of hundreds behind me listening to music played by the DJ. Behind them, people hanging out on the beach, the Surf Lodge in Montauk, and the restaurant with some lovely food. So thank you for that. I read an article this week, and again, this is like totally left field here, but I just pick up the stuff that I feel like. I pick up the stuff that I feel like this is interesting to me. Maybe it'll be interesting to you. And I know that at this moment I should really segue directly into my conversation with with Chef Levine about lobster rolls. But now that I've mentioned this article, I feel compelled to just go through it, and then we'll go back to the lobster roll thing. Here's an article. It's called "Everything You've Ever Wanted to Know About Cheese Rinds," and why it stuck out to me is because it pisses me off, frankly, when I see people cut around a brie so they can get to the inside and they leave the perfectly edible rind on the outside. Here's what you need to know. Most rinds are generally safe to eat. There's 4 kinds of cheese rinds, and there's only one you can't eat. And you'll know what kind it is because it's the kind that's wax. Don't eat the wax. Even though you grew up putting some waxy flavored lips into your mouth, in this case, don't eat the waxy part. Every other type of rind is safe to eat. The bloomy rind that you'll find on cheeses like a brie, bloomy, snowy white. Eat that. The washed rind, which can be, sticky and reddish and orange. It often occurs on what people think of as kind of the stinky cheeses. Blue, Gorgonzola, Roquefort. Go ahead, eat that one. And then there's natural rind cheeses, and these cheeses that form naturally during the cheese process. So, like, Parmesan, cheddar, edible. Every rind has a different flavor. Try them all, my people. I bring you now, since I got onto this whole thing about the lobster roll we had out there. I had a conversation today, just a few hours ago, with Chef Eric Levine. Levine works out here on the island in a city called Farmingdale. His restaurant, I want to say, is called 317, but I will refer to it in the conversation. And we chatted about lobster rolls. The only caveat that I give you here is while I'm chatting with him, he's literally building the restaurant. Guys are in the background drilling and sawing because I have bad karma when it comes to sounds. I turn my phone on, next thing I know there's a construction site and ambulance sirens. I'm having an interview with a chef talking about lobster, and there's buzzsaws going in the background. That said, here's my conversation with Chef Eric. I'll be back after about lobster rolls. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad that you're here because I know that you and I are going to talk about an important summer delicacy, the lobster roll. Am I correct?
That is correct. Lobster roll. It's interesting how it's become such a big. People become fascinated with lobster rolls these days. It's the greatest, weirdest thing. Everyone has a taste. Everyone has their, what they like, whether it's Connecticut or traditional or don't put anything in. Just give me a buttered roll with cold lobster. It's a very interesting, fun, weird thing.
Yeah, I by the way, two things. One is that I am one of those people. I mean, I kind of, I'm a purist, so I know how I like it. Right. We'll get to that in a second, but I guess why is it iconic, a lobster roll, do you think?
You know what? It's such an easy thing that's very accessible. It's kind of a fun summer thing. People enjoy it, but I do it all year round. Just because, who doesn't love lobster and who doesn't want a lobster sandwich? It's one of those things that people become fascinated with it. Over the years, it used to be something that you went up to New England and had a great, lobster roll, the best lobster rolls in the world. And now everyone's doing it. Everyone and the mother has an idea of what works well for a lobster roll or, again, there's so many variables to it as far as style. Some people love mayo, some people hate mayo. Some people love butter, some people hate the butter. So I think it's one of those things that you can't really say it's a regional thing anymore. I'm a purist, so I go after poached lobster. I go after a little bit of lemon, slight touch of mayo, salt, pepper, touch of lemon juice, and that's it. Yeah. On a buttered, like we do a brioche bun.
Yeah,
that's really soft, nicely toasted. That's how I go for it, but we get people all the time in the restaurants I've owned in the past. I'm sure it's going to be the same thing here, where everyone's a critic. They all love their lobster roll their way, and it's kind of like I always refer it back to lasagna. I won't ever make lasagna in any of my restaurants because everyone's mother makes lasagna, right. And their expectation is that their mind is going to taste like their mom. And I always tell customers, if you want to have your mom's lasagna, have her make it. Other than that, it's kind of one of those things that here's how we do X. And so you want to be able to, you accommodate the customers as much as you can, but sometimes they just, I need a little bit more lemon. All right, well, we'll give you more lemon on the side, or I want less lemon. You can't extract. So I'm a purist when it comes to lobster, so I just like it to be poached properly and then seasoned lightly.
Yeah, I'm the same way. You and I would enjoy the same thing. How do you How do you pick the best lobster when you go shopping for it?
I tend to go towards the female lobsters a little bit more. They're a little bit sweeter. And I try to find ones that have a softer shell, because that means they're in that stage where they'll be at their lightest and sweetest.
Is that really kind of all there is to it? That's all you kind of really need to know. You go. I mean, how do I know if I'm getting a good one?
Well, if it's not dead, you're in a good place.
Okay.
Really, if its legs are, if you turn it over and they look like little furry legs. If they're kicking and moving, you got a live one. But most people make the mistake of throwing their lobster into boiling water.
All right, so let's talk about the way to properly cook this thing. What's the ideal technique?
Well, I find to me that there's two ways to do it. One, you can put it I think of it as tea. You slowly heat it until it's cooked. So you get it to 165 and you shut it off and you let it sit and you let it continue to cook by the heat that's in there. Too many people boil it, and what happens is you throw a live animal into boiling water. It's going to tighten up.
Yep.
It's going to be rubbery. It's going to lose, the endorphins in its body, which are the sweetness to it. It's going to lose all that by its shock. So you never do that. The other way to do it. So putting lobster in a pot, slowly heating up to 165 and shutting it down until it's cool.
Okay.
The other way to do it that I found is turn a lobster upside down and let it fall asleep. Once it falls asleep, you put it in the water and then slowly cook it.
Right.
There's lots of techniques with, butter poaching it, which, you gotta crack it and poach it in the oil or olive oil or butter. But I think it's a simple way to do it. I'll flip it. I don't even crack the skull. There was a point where I always had to make sure that before I boiled it, because I used to boil it, I used to split the skull to kill it. But now I just lay it on its back in the cool water, put the pot on, and bring it to 165, shut it down for about 20 minutes, and then it's ready to go. Then ice it, and then crack the shell.
All right, perfect. All right, so now that we've done that and we removed basically the meat from the lobster, what's it seems pretty easy from there. How much if we're going to go mayo, how much mayo are we talking about? What do you use?
Me personally, I don't use more than a tablespoon per pound of lobster.
Great.
And I'll use a lemon. I will zest a complete lemon and then use the juice from that lemon for it.
What are you going to do with the zest? You put that into?
I'll put the zest in, yep, absolutely.
Yep. Great. All right, so perfect. And if we don't do mayo, because there are people like as you and I know who are, particular, the other option is if we're going to use butter. And I don't just mean butter on the roll. I mean some people want that lobster butter.
They call it Connecticut style.
Yeah, so what's the deal there? You saute it, you just mix it with melted butter. What's the best way?
Melted butter. Once the lobster is cooked, just toss a little bit of melted butter, butter the roll, and then.
All right, so we got the butter situation, and then let's talk about the other ingredient here, because at the end of the day, the bread choice matters. Now you're using a brioche, so you're bringing a little bit more butter to the equation. What do we want in a roll? Soft, potato, brioche, toasted. What's the deal?
Yeah. For me, I love a brioche because it still adds more butter to it. I also like it when it toasts up. It stays a little bit crunchy, but still soft on the outside.
Right.
So we'll butter it, flat top it, and then put the lobster into it. Some people love a potato roll. I don't like that because I find that it becomes too mushy.
Okay.
If you have a little bit of mayo or lemon in there, it's still going to break down that potato roll. Well, I love potato rolls for other things. For the lobster.
Tell people where the restaurant is and what you're cooking there.
So the restaurant is 317 Main Street in Farmingdale on Main Street. It is a American gastropub. A lot of craft, local. We have an event space as well for up to 300 people. But it's a really cool, fun, and funky place. We have an open kitchen that we're going to have a chef's table at. It's really kind of a very comfortable, casual place. But we're going to play a lot with seasonal menus. I'm working with a lot of local farmers. I just got hooked up with this and duck, and working with some local fishmongers. So really kind of really having some fun with it. There's a local herb grower called Reckner, and him and I were just talking about him building out some square footage, and he's going to grow all my greens, my tomatoes, hothouse for that. So it's going to be kind of a cool thing, and using a lot of local wineries and local New York. So like Hudson Whiskey, we're using a new vodka called Felony Vodka. They're phenomenal. It's just trying to work as much local as we can into the menu, and even with the beers. A lot of beer companies out here now that's about to become a bigger thing. So it's kind of cool.
All right. And what's the name of the place again in Farmingdale?
Well, the restaurant's 317 Main Street.
Yeah, no, 317. Yeah, I was kidding about the construction side. I assume it'll be quieter when I. All right, I'm gonna pop by at some point. We'll have a lobster roll together.
Absolutely, 100%. I do appreciate it. I apologize about the background.
All right, no problem, Erica. You got stuff to do. I'll see you over there in Farmingdale for a lobster roll and a local beer.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, my man. Right. Well, there you have it. Sorry about the noise. They're literally building the restaurant while we were on the phone. It happens, but I thought it was worth getting to anyway because lobster, great always, but certainly this time of year, especially when you make it in the lobster roll form. If you look into lobster, there was a time there was such a. I'm going long way back. I mean, long before my time. There was a time there was such a glut of lobster that it was cheap food. They used to feed workers with it when there was so much of it that it was inexpensive. Then, of course, the supply dwindled and the demand increased, and then it became kind of expensive and fancy. Now it's somewhere in between. What was I don't know, this lobster roll that I just had. Let me just pick up the menu. Let me just see what they charge for a lobster roll over here at the menu. Hang on. Lobster roll that I had, main lobster roll, $32 with French fries. All right, so at the place that I ate it, you can probably get them for considerably less if you're going to more of a shack type of operation. But I'll tell you what, you can also buy your very own lobster, and they're not prohibitively expensive. And then if you get them, what you're learning from a guy who makes a lot of them is that lobster goes in not boiling water. But that lobster can, you can kind of put it in cold water, to be honest with you, and then work your way up to 165 degree temperature and then turn the heat off and let it sit in there for 20 minutes. You got your lobster. Take it out, throw it on some ice. That'll stop the cooking altogether. Let it chill down and then cut out huge chunks of it and don't overdo whether it's the mayo or the butter. And then the other key ingredient, aside from a pinch of salt, is going to be some lemon. He uses both the juice of a lemon as well as the zest. And then you got one more ingredient, and it matters. Now, it's interesting to me because brioche, I understand, soft and buttery and holds a texture. I'm big on the potato bun. Now, he's saying you can't really use a potato bun, or you shouldn't because it'll break, it'll fall apart. But I'm not. But I think it's potato bun in that case would need to be, kind of toasted so that it does maintain its structural integrity. Well, I never thought I would hear myself talking about the structural integrity of the potato bun, and there I did it. So that's the lobster situation. I have, as always, at this point in the show, 9 windows open on my computer with the time to go to one or two of them, and I'm staring at a recipe for orecchiette with corn, jalapeno, feta, and basil. I haven't even read through it yet. I mean, I'm attracted to the ingredients, and there's a beautiful picture that you look at and you go, yeah, that's something I want to eat. Let's talk about the dish. Orecchiette, little ears, basically, that shape of pasta. With corn, we talked about that. Kernels, sweet. Jalapeno, we've talked about that. That hit of a touch of heat that awakens your buds, that works against the sweetness. So you have that kind of, you kind of have that It's interesting. They're I don't know. They're not really compatible. They are what are they? Contrasting, contradistinctive. They are, you get a little bit of sweet and a little bit of heat. And sweet and heat work beautifully together because they are offering you two highly contrasting sensations on your taste bud. Then, what else goes together with orecchiette and corn and jalapeno in this recipe? Feta. I love feta, because it's a tad salty but not too fatty, and yet, you put it together with some hot orecchiette, it's going to get just a little, it's going to soften up a little bit and give you a creaminess in that pasta. And then your final ingredient is basil. When I talk about basil and I talk about it being torn, I'm saying to you that you're better off tearing it with your fingers than you are cutting it with a knife into the chiffonade. There's nothing wrong with a chiffonade in the hands of a good chef with a sharp knife. The problem is most people don't use a sharp knife and don't have enough experience, and you start bashing basil around, you're killing it, and you're making it dark and black and limp. If you can do a chiffonade, great, but you don't have to. Get yourself some fresh basil, clean it, dry it, tear it by hand in whatever size pieces you want, and think about this. Orecchiette, ears, those little ears, sweet corn, spicy jalapeno, creamy feta, fragrant basil. That's a dish. I want that dish right now. 1 pound orecchiette, 4 tablespoons unsalted butter, 1 jalapeno finely chopped, 5 ears of corn shucked and kernels removed, kosher salt, 8 ounces crumbled feta cheese, 1/2 cup torn basil leaves plus more for serving, flaky salt for serving, optional. Large pot of well-salted water to a boil. When they say well salted, they mean as if you were drinking it from the sea. You go into the ocean, you taste that salt in that salt water. That's the level that we're looking for when you cook pasta. Add the pasta, cook it until it's short of al dente, 10 minutes. Drain it, and then reserve a cup of that pasta cooking water. Why? Because it's starchy and you're going to use it later, maybe, to mix everything together. Step 2. While the pasta is cooking, make the sauce. In a 12-inch skillet, melt butter over medium heat. Add jalapeno and cook until it's softened, 1 to 2 minutes. Add the corn. Okay, they're cooking that corn that you've got off the cob here, and cook it until it begins to brown in certain spots. So we're going to get a little caramelization on that corn, 3-4 minutes. Season it with salt, and then add 1/4 cup of the pasta water, which now is starchy because you cooked the pasta in it. Add that and bring that whole sauce to a simmer and cook it until it's reduced by half. That's only going to take a minute or two, but what appears first to be watery from the 1/2 cup of 1/4 cup of pasta water is now down to half of that, 1/8 cup, and it's looking saucy. Step 3, final step, add pasta to the skillet. That's important. You're taking the cooked pasta, drained, you're putting it in the skillet with the sauce, and then you toss everything around so that you can coat the pasta with the sauce. The feta cheese goes in at that point, 8 ounces of it. That's a decent amount of feta cheese. And, get this, another 1/4 cup of your pasta water, tossing until the pasta is slick and glossy with the sauce. This is how you make a pasta. If needed, and I'm reading right off the recipe, New York Times. If needed, add in another 1/4 cup of the pasta water. People, do not be afraid of water. It is a key ingredient, especially in a case like this when you need to determine the proper texture so that your pasta sauce adequately covers the pasta. Stir in the basil, put it into a large bowl, scatter it with the remaining basil. If you need a little, sprinkle a little bit of flaky salt, sea salt, obviously, I'm going to say, if you need it. And you got yourself orecchiette with corn, jalapeno, feta, and basil. Let's see. Do we have time for one more? We can always come back to the farro and pepe. By the way, in that sandwich article that I referenced, I suppose if you want to know the best sandwiches in America, the thing that kind of struck me was the percentage of adults who ate a sandwich on any given day. What's your guess? How many Americans eat a sandwich on any day? 10%? 20, 30, 40, 50, 70? What's your number? Well, if your number is 47%, you're correct. 47% of adults ate a sandwich on any given day. Wow. That's almost 1 out of every 2 people in this country are eating a sandwich in a day. We have a short time, and I would say we don't even really have time. No. Oh, 1 step too many. I am so sorry. We don't have time to necessarily go through arugula. Oh, yeah. You know what? How about this? Well, 2. Here's a really quick one from Mark Bittman in the New York Times. He makes watermelon sorbet. Here's another way to use your watermelon. Take a small watermelon, those minis. Take a half a cup of yogurt, plain, unflavored, right? Take 2 tablespoons of sugar and a tablespoon of lemon juice. You take the watermelon chunks, right? And he says you freeze them. And then when they're frozen, you put them in a food processor with a half a cup of yogurt, a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and a tablespoon of lemon juice. You process it till it's smooth. Careful not to let it become watery. Transfer it to a shallow glass or ceramic dish and freeze it for an hour. Then you got yourself some watermelon sorbet.
Wake up.
All right. Ladies and germs, we have 1 minute, so let us conclude in this way. This is episode number 61 of All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I am your host, Rob Rosenthal, author of the book Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. You can find me here on Armed Radio Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be talking about food. I'll have guests. Sometimes I'll go solo. Who knows what I'm doing? I will also tell you that if you want to listen to any of the past podcasts, including the one I mentioned with John George Van Richten last week, you just simply go over to iHeartRadio and search in podcasts for All You Can Eat or for me, Rob Rosenthal. With that, my friends, happy July and welcome to August. Remember, life is short, so never wait on the end.
Ain't nothing gonna stick on